Welcome back. We'll continue on with Committee of the Whole, General Government, and 3.1A. There is the item for discussion on honorariums and stipends. And this is an item that's been brought forward by Councillor Pellerin. There is a staff report included in your agenda package, and I will pass it on to Councillor Pellerin to speak about the honorariums and stipends.
Thank you, Madam Rochon. First, couple questions. I know I talked about that a few meetings ago. Which committee gets, is it just the planning, committee of adjustment, and I forget the other one there?
Through you, Madam Mayor, my understanding of the policy, I don't have it in front of me, would be any standing committee of council other than the legislative boards. The Police Services Board has a specific, are separate, so is the Library Board. So is the Eau Chateau and West Nipissing. So you would have had the Economic Development Committee. You would have had Planning. You would have had Committee of Adjustment. Which ones am I missing? Accessibility, cemeteries, yeah. Thanks. Agricultural, yeah.
And museum.
And
There is no
museum.
museum.
There you go.
There was.
Okay. Second question. Why the difference in 220 to 221 to 222? Just curious.
At least no idea. I guess 2020 is when it was passed. So I believe if you look at the memo, I believe it was passed in August of 2019. I think it didn't kick in though until late that year, Elisa.
Yeah, so some of the 2019 were paid in 2020. In 2021, we brought AcDev on board. We didn't have AcDev before that time. And a lot of it just depends on the number of meetings that were had by committee. So cemetery has been fairly inactive with just one a year. Museum has been inactive and committees. So therefore, we've had sort of a drop in which years have been paid out. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So my concern was, I know I've been on the committee for the last 16 years, and I've been on the other committees in town. We never had that until the last 4 years. So for the $75, to me, when you join a committee, you don't join a committee to make money, but it shouldn't cost you any money. So I remember way back, it would have been nice to get maybe your mileage paid, some gas money. So to me, the $75 should be reduced to, I don't know, maybe $30, and mileage be allowed for that person to come in.
Mm-hmm.
It would make it more fair to everyone. If you're coming, I know like one guy, I remember he was with us on the planning, Mark Ferrer. I know he's on a couple boards. When you're coming from Monnetville, it's a long drive. So we're not in the same, you know what I mean? So that's my concern. That's the point I wanted to raise.
Any other? Councillor Tessier?
How was the $75 arrived at when it was put in place?
Through you, Your Worship, this policy was arrived at and brought forward by, I believe, a request of a councillor, if I'm not mistaken, and totally driven at by council. I don't think staff had any input in determining the amount of money or any research in it. I think it came to a council and they decided that 75 was a reasonable number. Am I missing something, or is that pretty much it?
Much it, yeah.
Yeah, so it really, it was the previous council had a discussion like you were having and made that determination, set a policy, and we moved forward for the staff. We implemented that.
I would think that just from my thoughts, having a flat rate as far as the administration of it is a little easier for staff to manage. So if it's one rate for everybody, they're not sitting trying to do mileage calculations to figure out if John Smith should get this much and, Joe Jones gets this much. So perhaps at the time, the idea of it just being a flat rate across the board was meant for administrative ease of use on the policy, but I can't say that's what would make sense to me. Are there any other questions about this policy? How it's, Councillor Pellegrin?
Yes, I don't see the calculation of the mileage a big issue, because if you Google your address to this place, X amount of mileage for 4 years. If you show up, you get it. If you don't get it. So I don't know. To me, I would propose $30 plus your mileage, cap it at $45. If you're out in the boonies, it comes up to $75. We're still in that ballpark, and it's more fair for everyone. If you're coming from River Valley, Field, with the price of gas, that's my, I don't think it's a big issue to calculate there.
Councillor St. Louis.
So through you, Madam Mayor, I understand what Councillor Pellegrin is saying. However, when you bring up the fact of the price of gas, if I'm Mr. Fryer that you mentioned, I don't know the gentleman, and he's coming from Winnettville with a F-250 and we're giving $30 for gas, it's going to cost them that and more with the price of gas right now, or anybody coming from River Valley into a meeting with an F-250 or any other big vehicle. So how do we determine, or somebody else is coming with a little Honda Civic, so how do you determine who gets what for gas, right? So everybody's getting 30, but yes, it's going to cost them 50 for gas, and then we're giving them mileage. That's why I think, for me personally, I think a flat rate, much more reasonable, and people know coming into a committee, this is what the flat rate is. And like you said earlier, Mr. Pellegrin, you're 100% correct. You're not joining these committees to make money when you're not losing any. So if the flat rate is 75, if that's how they figured it 4 years ago, so that people are not losing money, I think that's probably the decision why they made it back then, to make it about $75. So if you do calculate the mileage and gas price, especially with the gas price today, that's probably the best way to do it. But that's just my thought process.
Any other questions or comments? Councillor Rivard?
Yeah, through you, Chair. I'd also like to comment that a flat rate, I think, is the easier option for administrative reasons, and just for the people who are on these boards as well. Now they won't have to keep track of their mileage or figure it out or submit their mileage like most. Like I know through my job, that's what I have to do. I have to submit my mileage whenever I do it. And there's also the idea that to have this flat rate, it's simple right off the bat. Everyone knows what they're getting into, and it might also encourage people to join these boards, right? To try and get the best people we can for these boards once they receive these. Like you said, that they're not losing money to be on the boards. I think that's really important.
Councillor Pellegrin?
Yeah, I don't agree with that reasoning. So do we
We'll just,
vote on this tonight, or?
Well, we would just do a show of hands to see who was in favor in looking at making any kinds of amendments to the policy. And if the majority of council feels that there are ways we could improve this, then we would send it back to staff for recommendations. If the majority of council is in favor of keeping it the way it is, then it would stop there, and we would continue with the policy as it appears now.
Before we go forward, just one more thing. The Committee of Adjustment and the Planning Committee are both the same night. That too, I know I was getting it. It's not fair. It gives you $150 for one night. And sometimes the meeting is half an hour at the most, and then you got the other one. So I don't think if you're on both committee at that night, you shouldn't get it on both committee. That's another point that I have.
I believe there is only one member that crosses over this term, just as it would affect one person, so I don't know, off the top of my head, I mean, I tend to agree with that, but it's, you also get the second, even if we do online meetings, I believe, right? So you were doing Zoom meetings, and that wasn't necessarily for the travel?
Yeah, but if you're not in person, you shouldn't get it.
No, I'm just, I mean,
We're talking.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not going to debate. I think that your valid points made all over. It comes down to a decision of council, what you want to do with it. I think there were some points made about having somebody recognized for having a meeting, and then there's a reverse point saying, listen, if you're volunteering to be on committees, you don't need it. Then, we're talking about travel and how to recompense people for the distances they travel. The other issue, as well as some comments that were made, is there might be in certain instances in certain committees some investigation that goes on with respect to travel and finding things ahead of time on your own time to be prepared. These are all small points. So I think, Madam Mayor, the issue is, who is in favor of keeping policy as it is? And if you have a straw poll like there are 5, then it's a moot point. And if you don't have that, then we have to have a discussion as to what the preferred option is. What I'm hearing is that a flat fee is what seems to be the go ahead, the go. So I leave it with you, Madam.
Councillor Nichols?
Madam Mayor, my only hesitation to change it now would be, we've already chosen the members. And like you said, you don't get into this to make money, but it might have been a motivator for some people. And I would just feel bad taking it back and changing it once they've already been chosen. Does that make sense to me? I don't know, just to add that point to it. They've already been chosen, and that might have been a positive enforcement for some. I don't know. I can't articulate it, but I think you all know.
To help them put their name.
Thank you.
And Councillor Cushay?
Thank you, through you, Madam Mayor, and I'm not sure if this could be directed to staff. I know this, from my understanding, it came from council, was entertained by council, approved by council, so staff really didn't, it didn't come, let's say, like from a request or a previous, issue or history. My head is going into, I guess, the realm of, have other municipalities done this? And if so, if we're reinventing the wheel, we're discussing, policy decisions and, maybe we should tweak this or that or whatnot. Before, let's say, doing anything, whether removing it or keeping it as is or changing it, I'd be more comfortable looking what's being done elsewhere, because there's no sense in reinventing the wheel. And I'm sure, we're not the only municipality that offers that, at the size of, the province, there's 444 municipalities. So I'm sure if we can shop around and see what's being done and, take what's, there may be, let's say, like, for example, like the travel and expenses policy, south of Parry Sound, it's a certain amount, north of Parry Sound, it's another amount. So maybe we could have that, built in for, the urban core versus the rural outlying areas. So it's just, I guess, just a suggestion.
If there are going to be changes, I think it's a longer discussion than we would likely do here tonight. But I'd like to get a feeling on where we stand just as a council, as who would like to see this, who would like to see the policy brought back and re-examined in more detail.
So, sorry.
Is that a yes or is that?
Oh, no, it was just a question. Go ahead. Never mind.
Okay, who would like to see the policy brought back and discussed in more detail, like to get some changes down 1, 2? 3.
Yeah, just the work around it, right, Madam Chair? Sorry.
What's that?
Like just to work on it to figure out the right, maybe flat rate, maybe it won't be 75.
Yeah, so like when we don't want to keep it as it is, we want to see if there's.
Yeah, I don't mind
changes
discussing
that-
it.
Okay, so can I see again, 1, 2, 3, 4? Okay, so that means I'd just keep it as it is because I think it's easier, would be my choice. So that would be 4 out of 5. So for
That would
now,
be, yeah.
Yeah.
So from consensus or from straw poll, I would suggest that it would stay this way for the term.
okay, so everybody's.
Where do you find 5?
Because it,
It was 4 to 4 would be in favor of making changes. I had you.
Yeah.
I had Councillor Kurchen, I had Councillor Tessier, and I had Councillor Grifal. That's 4. So that means 5 are in favor of keeping the policy as it is.
Where do you come to 5?
Councillor Nichol, Councillor Gagné, myself.
3?
Oh.
I forgot Jimmy's not here
I was just subtracting 4 from 9.
So, so I wouldn't go on a straw poll, despite what you saw last week when it's a tie. If council wishes to defer it and have us come back with the information requested by Conseiller Cochine, we can have a quick look and bring it to the first meeting in February.
So can I move to defer to
You
have
don't
some
need to, because it's a
more?
committee discussion.
Okay, so
So, but the minutes will reflect that we're going to come back to you in the first meeting of February with a little bit more info.
I'm sorry, Councillor Cutter. I forgot that Councillor Skill was not with us this evening.
I was wondering, am I? No, it's a good idea.
That's my bad, man. Okay, so we'll move on from that. Sorry, thank you, guys. Next is item C, and a status report on the vehicle for hire taxi bylaw. And I believe I'm going to pass that to Ms. Straddick, or would you like to speak?
Well, I think you, Madam Mayor, I think the memo speaks for itself with respect to where we are now. And so where we are now is obviously we had an issue this time a little bit later than this time last year, which basically had our existing taxi owner not meet the bylaw criteria. And then we brought back a vehicle for hire bylaw that looked at kind of incorporating everything and the different types of vehicles for hire that were going to come into play. I believe that the clerk provided a draft bylaw, Ms. Craddock, and that, we took the salient points of the draft bylaw. Then the discussion at that point was, and there was a discussion about the urgency of getting something right away and so on. And it was felt by staff and by the advice that we were receiving as well, that could be more problematic by only picking a few simple things on the short term and then fixing it later. What council agreed to is to look at doing a consultation process with various stakeholder groups. And so that's where we are now, really. One of the things we were looking to catch up on, and Straddick did the investigation, is that the advice from our legal counsel is that we may wish to do a consultation, but it certainly isn't mandatory to do a consultation. So with elections, with the transition, and a variety of other factors, we haven't obviously done the consultation from this fall to now, and we would be looking at scheduling a consultation in due course. Should council wish to confirm that they want to have the consultation take place. If council wishes to look at and pass the bylaw, we can certainly bring it forward at a very near meeting. I don't know that there's much to add other than that. That's where we are now. You wanted an update as to where we are with the taxi bylaw. That's where we are now, is we're kind of going to set up consultation. And we just haven't had the chance to do the consultation in that timeframe.
So the decision of the former council was to proceed with a comprehensive bylaw that included public consultation. And so what we're looking to establish here between us is if that is the direction that we wish to continue down as a council, or whether, our council has a different idea on how that the issue of taxi service within the municipality should be addressed. And so that's why it's before committee to kind of get out on the floor what our ideas are and how we think that it should proceed. So, and then staff will take the direction from us and move forward as appropriate. So with that, I would open the floor to questions or comments. Councillor Pellerin.
I assume there is a bylaw in place right now.
I don't believe, through you, Madam Mayor, I don't believe that bylaw was rescinded. If we're speaking in technicalities, the existing bylaw is in place right now. It's just that, again, I didn't have direct carriage of the file, so I'm going to be guessing, and then Ms. Craddock will see how right I am. The existing bylaw was for taxis, taxi stands, brokerage, and licenses. And what was really being regulated was the metering of the bylaw. That was the key component of it, was the metering of the bylaw and how that was. So the vehicles for hire, let's say Uber or Lyft or other fancy names in Southern Ontario and elsewhere, or what's happening presently with certain individuals getting into the vehicle for hire business was not contemplated in our bylaw. By point of history, I believe the taxi license owner a few years back expressed a concern for the Uber type vehicles, but I'm not sure whether that was incorporated in the bylaw or not. But in any event, if we are to have a bylaw, the idea is, does it incorporate every form and fashion of a vehicle for hire? Or do you need a bylaw and allow the market to just continue? Which in some municipalities, Uber just exists and they're not regulated. So the past council expressed a concern over the safety of its residents with respect to the potential for not vetting drivers and the vehicles. The taxi bylaws, what was in there, had requirements on ensuring the quality of the vehicle, the age of the vehicle, and it also had requirements vetting the drivers. So that's what the original taxi bylaw had. And I think that's what the former mayor was very insistent upon, was the public safety aspect in the discussions in September. And that's what led us to here. So we do have a bylaw, but it doesn't mean anything right now because nobody's following that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Questions, comments? Councillor Tessier.
Consultation with the potential local providers, so the people that are going to provide the service might be beneficial with respect to maybe getting their point of views about the bylaws, maybe something that's missing with the current situation now with maybe monitoring how they send out service calls or things like that. Like I know they have the Uber uses the app, but as a not the taxi has their own method, but for the like the shuttles and all that, how to monitor their pickup or their, like, is it just calls that they receive and that information?
So consultation.
Consultation with
especially
the
for the service
providers, yeah.
I think the other thing that the bylaw required and if we were to regulate, is the insurance aspect of it. So, for people who are driving people around in their vehicles and taking money, if they don't have the proper insurance and there is an accident or a death, it's not covered. So you talked about vehicle safety, driver safety, and then there's also the insurance component of it as far as making sure the public is protected in all instances there. Okay. Other questions or comments? Councillor Boucher?
I'm in agreement with what's being presented. I would, I guess, go with public consultation too, just because you want to get the end user, feedback as well before starting to make some, changes that will end up affecting them. So I'm in agreement. The only thing, I guess, my question would be, so I guess in North Bay, they don't have the OPP structure, so they have the police service.
That's right.
How would that kind of tie in with the existing police service or the structure we have here in West Nipissing? Would that be delegated still to the police, or would that be held more towards, current administration, like municipal administration?
It would be through our bylaw enforcement
Bylaw
officer.
enforcement.
So the OPP doesn't really have a structure where they want to get into regulating that kind of stuff because it's going to be a bylaw put in place by the municipality. Then we would also carry the responsibility for the monitoring and enforcement of that bylaw. And that's where one of the challenges come in, is that, if we're going to regulate something, then we need to be able to monitor and enforce it. There is cost associated with that. So I think when you're looking at putting together, if you want to do a comprehensive bylaw, one of the things is that the licensing fees that we consider as we move through this process, this isn't a quick thing that's, we're not going to have a taxi bylaw in 2 meetings from now. It is trying to figure out what that fee structure looks like so that we're also covering some of the costs that we are going to bear as the municipality, as our taxpayers are going to bear in the administration of this bylaw. So the more you regulate something, of course, the more it's going to cost from that perspective. So, but yeah, I appreciate your comments. Councillor Pellerin?
Yes, Madam Mayor. Right now, do we have taxis in town? I don't have a clue.
So then, as Mr. Barber sort of talked about earlier, the problem with our existing bylaw is that taxi was very narrowly defined. And so there are people who might have taxi that are calling them, but they're actually really just shuttles, or they're actually vehicles for hire and things like that. So there are individuals and companies providing vehicle for hire services, whether we would define them as taxi under our bylaw or not, but there are people providing services right now, yes.
And they don't have to abide by any rules right now, or?
No, again, it's our bylaw is so narrowly defined as what is taxi, and though it mentions some of these other types of vehicles for hire, it doesn't have any way to actually license. There's no steps, and it's a big gap in our existing bylaw. So it is a bit of a free market out there right now, with places that provide good service getting more repeat calls.
Okay.
Councillor Boucher?
Through Madam Mayor, I had, I guess, another question. I guess right now, because of the nature of the market, like you had mentioned, it's a kind of like an open market. Is there any risk to the municipality if something were to happen? Because if the municipality should be regulating and is not, I guess.
No, the municipality doesn't have to regulate.
Okay.
There's not a requirement, we learned that where you will incur a liability is in the wording of your bylaw and your failure to enforce it in the appropriate, and then should something happen that we should have reasonably been able to foresee by the controls in our bylaw, that's where we would incur liability. Right now, we're not liable.
Should the current bylaw be rescinded? Is there value in that? Like, is there a risk in having that bylaw sitting on the books as a current bylaw? So if we know that this process is going to take us 2, 3, or 4 months to get through from now until we have something final that we're ready to put our names on, is there any value in bringing the existing bylaw back and just officially scratching it off the books?
Through you, your worship, I don't see any value in it other than cleaning up the books, because it really doesn't come into play right now at all. Now, and I apologize, but should A1 cabs start doing business here? And I'm not, then our bylaw would kick in. And so we would have some enforceability should a taxi company with a taxi stand come into play. I'll also indicate, because I've been here a long time, these taxi bylaws have a certain historical perspective on the evolution, and it wasn't vehicles for hire. They actually the rate, the meter is actually regulated by the bylaw, and they have to ask for permission. And also the number of taxis that a broker was allowed to have. And that was, if you're going to regulate the price, then we're going to also regulate the market so that there isn't 15,000 taxis that are charging too much. And so back in the day, before there were the Ubers and the vehicle for hire, it was all taxi. And so we were controlling a lot, and I think that's no longer relevant now. That part of control is no longer relevant in 2023.
Let's be clear, like there is an option for this council to decide that we do not want to be in the business of regulation. And there is there's nothing to prevent us from doing that. It takes away a lot of the burden of us having to manage a bylaw like that. But from councillors who are charged with, taking care of our residents, you kind of have to balance, the difficulty of writing, enforcing, monitoring this kind of bylaw against the public safety concerns and where we want to be on that. So, there always were three options to this, which is no regulation, minimal regulation, or a comprehensive bylaw. And that is a decision that is still up to us. Where they left it is that they wanted to move forward with comprehensive bylaw, and they wanted to do so with public consultation. And so is that what we want to do? And with the consultation, without the consultation. So, we don't have to have a bylaw, but I think that there is a demand from our residents as far as, because we do have vulnerable populations. We do have a lot of school children who use taxi services. We have a lot of elderly people who use taxi services. And so, we do have the choice, but, I think that there has been shown to be a call from residents on the front of public safety. So. Yes, Councillor Berger.
Yes, Madam Mayor, I'm thinking like Au Chateau have their own bus and all this. Community Living has got their own thing too. Like all the people working there through the insurance, they travel their clients. So the rest of the taxpayers is left. And I don't know, I would tend to say, let the market, it's a free market. Let's open it up. I don't know. Like the cannabis stores, it's going to regulate by itself.
Any other questions or comments?
I just, through you, Madam Chair, I'd like to touch on what Councillor Courchine brought up with the police board. I know in our package it mentions a lot about the North Bay Police Board governing their bylaw. And it's a little, now knowing that the OPP wouldn't be able to do that and would fall completely on our bylaw officer, I think that's a heavy task. We're just looking at, we're going to be talking about a bylaw officer here soon. That's a little concerning as to how we could enforce that with one full-time bylaw officer with everything else he or she will have to do in the future. And, I don't know, that's just a little concerning on my end, but then on the other hand, I do know that we need more options available throughout canvassing. There were a lot of mostly elderly who maybe their kids live out of town and they had a real hard time getting anywhere to do their groceries, go see their doctor, anything like that. So this seems like you said earlier, that it will take lots of time. I'm willing to hear more options or comments. It's a tough one to figure out, I think.
Councillor Tessier?
Yeah, so if we don't have a bylaw, then does it fall on the OPP to action if they're like, it would be the service provider that if there's any issue, where would be their recourse? Is it to the OPP?
Like for the
Like-
service provider, yeah,
Like there's competition and things,
The-
stealing of clients, picking up people,
Right.
just that conflicting.
So I guess what I would say, and I'm not taking a side or anything, where the OPP would come in obviously is if they were aware of a violation of a law. And so if somebody had a threat uttered, or if they were mistreated, or there was a security issue, if there is a transportation issue under the Highway Traffic Act or public safety or Ministry of Labor, could come into play and that kind of thing. So the OPP would fulfill its mandate in upholding the law. Where the bylaw could come into play would be ensuring, as the mayor indicated, ensuring that from our perspective that at least the providers have the proper deductible or liability insurance, so that should there be something that their customers can pursue them, they know that there would be that in place. Taxi bylaws vet the drivers, so there could be some of that. That has become onerous though, because it isn't as easy to get criminal record checks as it used to be. And in fact, to speak historically, North Bay takes their bylaw, but that's not necessarily in every area that happened. In fact, historically, our West Nipissing Police in the early 2000s managed the bylaw as well, and then it got moved to us as well. So, but that would be the benefit, would be the extra level of protection that you would provide. So, I guess one point, from an administrative perspective, if I might enter into the fray a little bit, is I think Councillor Rivard has a good point. Is it depends on how much activity we are required to maintain on the bylaw. Our bylaw enforcement officers would be out in the field to manage certain issues, but and depending on how detailed your bylaw is and how much work is involved, yes, that could be a resource issue. If it is getting a license and having them show proof of criminal record check and proof of liability insurance, that could be handled very easily with Ms. Craddock's staff at the front. They would just, as we used to with taxi bylaws, right? Ms. Dupree would get the information, the applications, and we'd ensure that everything was there, and we'd issue the licenses. So that part's not that tough. It's the other part of making sure the vehicles, the vehicles are roadworthy and all of that kind of stuff. That's where it would become a little complicated, as Mr. Councillor Rivard is talking.
Councillor St. Louis.
So through you, Madam Mayor. So with that said, though, Mr. Garbo, so my question would be, I don't see how it would fall on the bylaw officer to make sure that a vehicle is up to par to be on the road, right? That would fall on the MTO. And to add to what Councillor Tennessee was asking a while ago, I believe that a comprehensive bylaw is a good thing, because we need to make sure that the members of the public are safe. And going back to what I said, the OPP will not pull a shuttle over and go through the whole vehicle to make sure the brakes are okay, to make sure the shocks are okay. They don't do that. They will pull you over just like they pull any other citizens over. And it's not their responsibility to make sure that the vehicle is in good order. Just like it won't be their responsibility to make sure that shuttle A is charging you $150 to go to field. However, the other person is charging you $50, and you're going to go to the police and say it's not fair. They won't make any decisions on that. I think a comprehensive bylaw for us in our municipality is a good thing to move forward on. I get that it's a lot of work and there will be extensive work to be done. However, I don't think there'll be that much more work added to our bylaw officer with only the exception to make sure that while he's on duty, whatever rates that we decide on, that's what they're following. And I'm sure a few others, I mean, I'm not very familiar with the whole process. However, I don't think and we need to also keep in mind, a lot of these taxis are going to be running throughout the evening. And depending on our bylaw officer's schedule, if he's 8 to 4, well, he's not working at 7, 8, or 9, right? So I don't think it's going to be much of an issue for the bylaw officer. There'll be some added work, yes, so I don't want to scare anybody interested in the position. However, I think a comprehensive bylaw study needs to be done because we need this for the members of our public. I hear it every day. That's something that people ask me all the time, and especially through the holidays that just went by. The offers or the opportunities that are there right now for people driving people around, I'm telling you, we could have taken a vehicle and there's no way we did because we did not trust the individuals driving.
Okay. Just with that, where we are in the debate now, I wouldn't mind seeing just a straw poll. Who would be in favor of going forward, working towards drafting a comprehensive vehicle for hire bylaw? Because then we can move this. It's got to go back. Okay, we definitely have direction for staff there. And who would be in favor of doing so with public consultation as part of that process? Okay, so I think that's fairly resounding direction for staff as far as where we will move. So
Just one question while we're on, so I don't have to come back
Yeah.
all the time. You know, public consultation can take a variety of different forms. You know, if you look at the trailer bylaw, please don't, there was 6 or 7 all over the geography, but given the fact that it's, for the large part, going to be mostly an urban thing with obviously some rural roots, and my recommendation would be that we hold one session. We hold an electronic session as well to provide feedback electronically. And as Councillor Tessier indicated, get direct feedback from the providers now. And then take that information and then bring it back to council if that's okay. Because quite frankly, if you're asking for us to go around and try and schedule meetings in January and February all over, we just don't have the nights for it. So if you'll indulge me into ensuring that you receive the information that you need, that would be my preference.
Councillor Sagan.
I think that's a great idea, considering there's no taxis right now for people to come from out of town.
Good point. No, I would agree that if there was one in-person session held and one electronic that was open to everybody, that would meet those requirements. And then, as Mr. Barbeau explained, also reaching out to both service providers and specific user groups.
Yeah, that's exactly what was in the memo, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So if everybody's okay with that, we'll leave that with staff and also working on these to push out that consultation, and we'll revisit that. Probably not the next meeting, but maybe a month from now. Can see where we're at here. So I'll move on to item D, which is a creation of an ad hoc committee to review the procedural bylaw. So again, there's a short memo here from staff. There had been talk in some of our sessions about just some ways we would want to modernize the procedural bylaw, and it was something that kind of needed to be taken a look at. It is one of those projects that I think is a little bit daunting for a group of 9. So the recommendation would be just to have a small committee work on developing some of those changes and then coming back to council with a kind of before and after version, going through it, getting feedback and going from there, instead of trying to, amend 21-page procedural document on their own. So I put myself and our deputy mayor, Jamie Restool, forward and would recommend that we look for one other person to participate in that process. Councillor Diane?
Madam Mayor, if you don't mind, I'd like to put my name forward.
Okay.
I would like to put my name forward too.
We could do 4.
Yeah, sure.
Other interested parties? So we would work on that over the next, whatever month or so.
Right.
It probably won't come back for the 7th of February, but we'll look at making some of those changes. Sorry, any questions or comments on that item? Okay. So if everybody's okay with that, straw poll, Councillor Tessier, Councillor Gagne, myself, and Councillor Restool will work with Lisa and Mr. Barbeau, or maybe whoever.
Right.
Whoever Mr. Barbeau picks out of the hat for that, and we'll come back with some changes. If any of you have looked through and have things that have nickled you, you can send me an email just to identify any issues that you might want us to discuss as our group, and we'll come back in a month or 6 weeks with suggestions on how we might look to update that, and we can debate it fully as a council at that time. Sound good? Yes. Okay, so item E on the on general government, sorry it's so long to make, is the reestablishment of a youth advisory committee. So I'm going to just let Steph speak briefly just to the history of that, because it's been quite some time since we've had an active youth committee. For myself personally, and I think other councillors have mentioned that they heard a lot during the campaign about finding new ways to keep youth engaged and motivated and involved in our community. So I'll just let Steph, Mr. Poulet, and speak to the just to the history, and we can talk about it a little bit more.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We did have a youth advisory committee. The youth advisory committee has been non-existent for, I'm going to say, the better part of 6 or 7 years. The committee evolved and reached its peak at one point with the involvement of the youth and members from the public as well, and then it kind of fizzled out. We tried to get it back going, but then we ran into issues with our youth drop-in center. We ran into issues of lack of participant. We ran into issues dealing with social media and those types of related issues, which drove a lot of people away from the committee. So we came back to council, and council basically made the decision to shut down our drop-in center for liability reasons for the corporation. So there has not been a formal youth committee for the last number of years. As you alluded to, there has been a lot of chatter within the community about maybe getting a youth committee to make sure that the voice of the youth is heard within the community. So we're looking from council as far as direction to potentially bring this type of committee back. I think that we'd like to dive into and look at best practices if council wishes to bring this type of committee back, and look at what other jurisdictions, what other committees are doing, and look at structures to ensure that the committees are successful if we're going to reintegrate this into our community. So there's some work that needs to be done, and we would be glad to undertake this and bring this back to council with some options, recommendations, and terms of reference and whatnot for council to consider in the near future.
I mean, I've been all in favor of doing some kind of youth committee since the campaign. And so what we're looking for here is consensus from council that this is something that we'd like to move forward with direction from council. Staff will start working towards developing terms of reference and structure, some options on what that committee could look like. And then it would come back for us to formally create it. But at this point, we just, if our council is on board that this is something we want to move forward with, staff will start putting in the work to figure out what that looks like and how it could be done. Councillor St. Louis?
Through you, Madam Mayor, I think it's a fantastic idea. Like I've said in the past and in my not so good speech at my, I think the youth of today need places to go. They need direction and they need support more than ever now, especially with everything that's going on in today's public view. So I think it's a fantastic idea. You mentioned the the drop-in center. So I'm not sure if are we still talking the same old drop-in center where it used to be? Or are we also discussing maybe a different drop-in center for the kids? That's just out of curiosity for myself. But either way, I think any little bit that we can do for our youth is fantastic. And it also ties into what about a lot of others that we've been saying is to try to keep our youth here, even with other, for their future and jobs and industries and anything, right? So I think it's a fantastic idea.
Yeah, I think it's important just to note that just the creation of the committee itself doesn't necessarily mean a return of the drop-in center or what that looked like before. But it will give us the opportunity to connect with youth and see what we can do that would build for them. Like it might not look like what it looked like back in 2014 or 2012, but to at least start at the community level where we can start hearing from the awesome people that we have that are going to be tomorrow's leaders. It's definitely a start where for many years they haven't had a voice, they haven't had a way to engage back with our council and with the municipality. Councillor Pellerin?
Yes, Madam Mayor. Yes, I had that discussion with quite a few families in Vernon about that. And not even like a youth center. It's more what can we do to entertain them? Like we had some good ideas like the Werner Arena, roller skating in the summertime. Perfect. Basketball court, just where they took down the old gymnasium, Werner. So there was quite a few young families really interested about this.
Well, and the great, sorry, I'll just jump in. The great thing about having a youth committee is the youth can tell us what they want to do. They can tell us the kinds of activities. Like it's not for us 40, 50-year-old people to tell them what kind of fun they should want to have, right? Oh, sorry. And you 30-year-olds too, sorry. And that's the great thing about having a committee like this is that they can be involved in driving what their West Nipissing looks like, right? So, other questions, comments? Oh, yeah, Councillor Pellerin?
Yeah, and for sure involve members of the public. I'm sure there'd be a lot of interest.
Councillor Rivard?
And just to add about engaging the youth, it'd be important to engage. There's already groups within our high schools and things like that, so we'd have a great chance of reaching out to them and get those students who are willing to speak up and tell us what they want. And this would give them another avenue to bring it forward to us as council or staff and try and get things moving forward for them. I know I've spoken with someone from the health center already who's looking to create some sort of drop-in center. You were mentioning a drop-in center, so it's kind of like a safe space similar to Out Loud in North Bay. It's a great idea. It's still very much in the beginning stages, but I think something like that would benefit the youth advisory committee as well, or the youth advisory committee would work with that. And there's a lot of potential, that's for sure.
Yeah. So if council is generally in favor, we would have staff work, Councillor Rivard and I may meet with Mr. Poulin just to kind of drive some ideas and structure, because I think we've both done a little bit of research on those things. And as a chair of community services, it would kind of fall under Councillor Rivard's umbrella of responsibility there. Staff would come back with some terms of reference and suggestions on how we could structure that for a future meeting. Okay, yes? Everybody looks good with that? Youth? Yes? Okay, awesome. And then basically it's the same discussion all over again, and this time in regards to Community Services Committee. Again, we just want a consensus from council to have staff move forward. We've had economic development committees, but there has not really been anything in place to drive kind of public input into what our community services portfolio looks like. And that could be anything from arts, culture, recreation, leisure. And so the idea would be to also have that a committee established. There has not been one before. So there is no terms of reference to look back on. So again, it would be with the purpose of directing staff to look at what the structure, how many people, what it looks like, and then bring that back to council for final approval. Do we have questions or comments on that? Councillor Tessier?
Madam Mayor, does that also include like museum?
Yeah. Yeah, so that would be arts, culture, heritage, recreation, and leisure sport. Other questions or comments? Is of this council in favor of moving forward with the development of a community services committee of public members? Yep. Very good. It's all good.
There'll be 2 resolutions next meeting.
Okay, so there'll be there'll be the terms of reference for 2.
There'll be resolutions to move forward with the study.
Okay.
To mobilize staff.
Okay, so from Mr. Barbeau, we'll have 2 resolutions for those on the next meeting. So that is the end of general government, and we're gonna do fine here. So with that, we're gonna move on to item number 4, which is our correspondence and accounts. And Madame Dupuis, if you would.
Elle est proposée par conseillère Nicole. Seconded by Conseiller Gagné, be it resolved that the minutes of council held on December 20th, 2022 be adopted as presented.
Questions or comments? All in favor? Carried. Okay, and number 4.2.
Il est proposé par conseillère Nicole, secondé par conseiller Courchain, be it resolved that the minutes of the West Nipissing Library Board held on September 8th, 2022 be adopted as presented.
Questions?
No.
No questions or comments on that? All in favor? Okay, 30. And then there's nothing on our notice of motion, so new business under 6.1. We have a motion to authorize the hire of a full-time bylaw enforcement officer, Madame Dupuis.
Il est proposé par conseiller Gagné, secondé par conseillère Nicole, sorry, I apologize. Whereas at the meeting held on December 20th, 2022, council discussed the municipal bylaw enforcement officer position and in particular a recommendation to hire 1 full-time officer instead of 2 part-time officers. Be it resolved that council for the municipality of West Nipissing authorizes the director of corporate services to proceed with advertising and hiring of 1 full-time municipal bylaw enforcement officer.
Okay, questions or comments? Okay, all in favor? Okay, carried unanimously. Thank you. And item 6.2, please, Madam.
Il est proposé par conseiller Gagné, secondé par conseillère Nicole. Whereas at the meeting held on December 20th, 2022, council agreed with staff's recommendation to rescind the municipal vaccination policy number 2022/18. Be it therefore resolved that the vaccination policy number 2022/18 is hereby rescinded effective immediately.
Questions or comments? Councillor Tessier?
I would like to just make a comment, if I could
Okay.
read. So I want to take a moment to acknowledge that this policy caused a lot of unnecessary harm and animosity within our workforce and community. I believe that this policy was mistakenly adopted 12 months ago. The general population knows that today that the COVID vaccine doesn't stop the spread of the virus. 12 months ago, the municipal council was well aware that the spread did not correlate with vaccination status prior to this policy being adopted. A constituent had presented to council the Public Health Ontario data showing that by January 2022, there were equally or more cases reported per capita in vaccinated people versus unvaccinated people. Unfortunately, the outcome of the vote from the municipal council resulted in the implementation of this punitive policy. With all my heart, I extend my apologies to those who were affected negatively by this policy, and I hope that as a municipality and a community, we can move forward. Thank you.
Thank you for your statement. Any other questions or comments? Councillor Pedre?
I have a question, just, I don't know if it's, with that vaccine mandate, I don't know if it's the right time to, was there anybody that lost their jobs or? No?
No, there were two individuals put on administrative leave, but they did not, they were not terminated.
Okay, I'm just curious. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, I'll put it to a vote. All those in favor of the resolution? It's carried. Thank you. Okay. And item 6.3, please.
Il est proposé par conseiller Saint-Louis, secondé par conseiller Courchaine. Whereas at the meeting held on December 20th, 2022, Council was informed of the opportunity to submit a grant application to the Hydro One Energizing Life Community Fund, which supports community projects promoting physical, psychological, and emotional well-being in communities across Ontario. Be it resolved that Council for the Municipality of West Nipissing authorizes the Director of Economic Development and Community Services to submit a funding application to Hydro One Energizing Life Community Fund for a community garden project.
Okay. Any questions or comments on this resolution? No. All in favor? Okay. Carried. Thank you. Okay, and item 6.4.
So this matter requires a decision from Council as to the composition of the West Nipissing OBPD Detachment Board.
Oh, okay. Yes,
So I'll
of course.
pass it to.
Okay, so there is a memorandum in your packages in regards to the composition going forward of the OPP boards. I read it. Would you like to speak any further what's included in the memorandum?
Through you, Madam Mayor, not overly, other than the Ministry of the Solicitor General is undertaking a review of police boards. Originally, as the memo indicated, and the police board took an active role in the past term with respect to ensuring that we maintained a police board for the municipality of West Nipissing. What they wanted to do was consolidate and have one board for each detachment. We, under the leadership of our board, indicated that wasn't going to be working for us. And but now what they're requiring is a decision from council. What they want to do is take away, it would appear, and I'm probably simplifying this, Ms. Craddock, but they want to basically go from 2 provincial appointees to 1. That's the common denominator, and there's 3 options. And then it's whether you want to have and maintain 2 municipal councillors and go to 2 municipal appointees. Right now we have 1. Or do you want to go with 3 municipal councillors, maintain the municipal appointee, and then the 1 provincial appointee?
I'll just speak briefly, from my perspective, although there are three options given, option number 3 would require us to change the composition because right now we have 2 members of council. I would think that is not something that we want to do because we just appointed all of our boards. So to me, option 3 doesn't seem like it's the place we want to go because we'd have to tell one of our councillors that they're not going to participate. Which leaves our council with a decision between option 1 and option 2. So that it would be 3 council members and 1 community representative, which would mean 1 additional member of council, once this change were made, would be appointed to that board. Or staying with the 2 members of council that we have and opening up to another member of the community. So that's kind of where we are, and we do need to make a decision on this. Councillor St. Louis?
Sorry, so through you, Madam Mayor, how would we decide, obviously, kind of saying what I would prefer, how would we decide on the second community representative? Would we just go to what we've already voted upon and or see who came in second? Or would we open to everyone? I would prefer just look who came in second.
Yeah, I think to me, it's soon enough. It's a decision of council, but to me, it makes sense. We only just did the appointments last week. We've already gone through all the recruitment to process. So if that were the way we would go, I believe there was actually a tie for the next position down. So it would probably have to come back to council for us to decide between the 2 people who came in second, next up after the person that we did appoint. So again, that's not up for me to decide, but I would, as a council, I think it's the easiest way to do it if that were the decision we were going to go with.
Sure.
Councillor Pelletier?
Yes, Madam Mayor, just one question. How often do that committee meets?
Is it once a month?
Every
Quarterly.
Quarterly, every 3 months.
4 meetings a year.
Okay, and I don't know if somebody here is interested.
I'm sure we could find a member. I would do it. That wouldn't be that wouldn't be an issue. I don't think that we have a problem having one of us sit on in that position, especially quarterly. It's not a big commitment of time for sure. So I don't know how to get from here to there.
Well, to you, Madam Mayor, the question right now is one of structure only. It isn't about how we would fill the vacancy. So if you, I just heard another option, and sorry, I haven't been paying complete attention, but my first assumption is you want it to be 2 and 1, and then worry on how you have the second community appointment. Was that? So there's 2 options really. There's Councillor Pellerin's option about having a 3rd elected official, or keeping it at 2 elected officials and having two appointees from municipal appointees. So it really is kind of a vote as to who prefers one or the other. That'll form the resolution, and then we'll fill the vacancy later on. Yeah.
Okay, so do I get a feeling first from?
Yes.
Yeah, so who would be in favor of doing kind of a 2 community, 2 member of council? 1, 2, 3, that's enough. Okay, so that's how we would fill in the
Il est proposé par conseiller Cochon, appuyé par conseillère Tessier. Be it resolved that the preferred composition of the West Nipissing OPP Detachment Board shall be comprised of the following members. Total number of boards members 5, council members 2, community representatives 2, provincial appointee 1.
Okay, any other questions or comments on that? Okay, all in favor? Okay, carried. I think that's it. I am not going to give a report tonight except to say Happy New Year to everybody. It's good to see you all back. It's fun to start the year all together so early. I look forward to 2023. Other than that, I think we've been here for a long time tonight.
Il est proposé par conseillère Tessier, appuyé par conseiller Courchaine. Be it resolved that bylaw number 2023-1, being a bylaw of the municipality of West Nipissing to confirm the proceedings of council at its meeting held on the 3rd day of January 2023, shall come into force and take effect on the date it is passed.
Questions or comments? All in favor? Thank you.
Il est proposé par conseiller Courchaine, appuyé par conseillère Tessier. Be it resolved that the meeting of council held on January 3rd, 2023 be adjourned.